Today on For What It's Nerd, we are discussing Superman. I watched it yesterday. Here are my thoughts. First off, let's just get it out of the way straight away. I did really enjoy this movie. There are things to say about it in both directions, both good and bad, and we will get into that. But I think it's important to say out of the gate that I did enjoy it. The reason for that is, and I think this is something that we need to discuss before we actually go into discussion of the movie itself, and that is there's a lot of following online, mainly Twitter, that I've seen regards deep dislike for Superman because it is not a Snyder film. Now, the Snyder cult has been a thing for a long while, and there are perfectly reasonable people within that just want to bring the Snyderverse back. And whilst I personally think that's not going to happen at this point, well, definitely not going to happen at this point, and I thought it wasn't going to happen before, there are people within that fandom, that group of people who are almost nefarious with it. Maybe that's a bit strong of a word. I don't know. Maybe more like underhanded. Is that even? That's basically they're being disingenuous about what Superman is and who Superman is as a character, and more to the point, what this movie is succeeding at, what Superman is succeeding at. It is making revenue. It is succeeding as a movie. People are interested in this movie. People are liking this movie, and there's a lot of like mental gymnastics going on with some of this Snyder fandom to undercut this movie because they want their Man of Steel back in Henry Cavill. And also, can I just say, and I do like Henry Cavill myself, in a certain, I think he's become overrated now, mainly because of this. I think he has become this kind of beacon of what Superman should be, and this beacon of acting. And I think he's okay. I don't think he's a bad actor by any stretch, and I do like his passion for the things that he plays, Superman, Geralt, etc. in The Witcher. But I think it's coming to a point where now he has been overhyped by a certain few, and that makes me less excited in seeing him in things, because these people are kind of ruining his image. They're attaching him to something that is over. I don't know. That's not his fault, but I do feel that's something that I kind of inherently hold now. It's like, he kind of promotes this unhealthy fandom, not by his own actions, but by his being, so to speak. So that's a little frustrating in its own way, but that is part of it, for sure, in my head. Now, there's been a lot of discussion around the Superman film in other ways too, and I'm still going to discuss this before we actually get into the movie, because these are issues surrounding the movie, not really the movie itself. Another one being that it is woke and an immigrant story. Well, that wasn't so much an air quotes that was said, and as well as that it deals with politics currently spanning the world. So let's discuss that. So first off, the immigrant idea. The fact that Superman is someone not of Earth and becomes part of Earth is like the biggest allegory for immigrants / if you want to call it, refugees, right? So similar ideas. A refugee can be an immigrant. An immigrant isn't a refugee. And by that, I mean that you can have people come into a country by way of refuge, but they have still immigrated to a country. And what I think people need to realize is that fundamentally this story is about saying, and it says it in black and white in the movie, but this movie is about saying that you can instill the morals of the place where you are at, and if you've gone there in the first place, you typically are in line with those morals. So when you shun someone who has come to your country and is trying to make a living for themselves in that country, you are essentially telling them that it doesn't matter if you take our morals, it doesn't matter if you do everything by the book, it doesn't matter if you care about bettering yourself, you shouldn't be here, you don't deserve to be here. And no one deserves a space in this world. Like, no one deserves to have, like, yeah, you can have personal property, and that's a whole other conversation, but no one deserves to tell someone else that they can't be somewhere. If legal process has been taken, if it has been done with due diligence, and these people are hardworking, caring, proper, hardworking people, they should not be shunned. There's a case, of course, to be made for people who are coming into this country illegally to do illegal activities. That's a totally different kettle of fish. And on top of that, that is something that is used as a scapegoat to talk about the innocents. And there are innocent people every day coming to countries that are better for themselves because the world has been torn apart by war in a number of areas. And this goes into what we're going to be talking about next. But these people need to escape because they are dying where they are. You know, this is a big theme of this movie. It's a big theme of Superman. Superman does not want to let anyone else die because he knows that his planet died. He knows that his people died for making mistakes that our planet is making, essentially. That isn't laid out exactly in the film. It's a subtext, but it is definitely the reason why Superman is so obsessed with saving everyone. And you see that through the movie. He's saving everyone in battle. He's saving even squirrels, and like you see him so many points trying to like stop everyone from being hurt in a battle, like turning around asking people if they're okay, you know, protecting them, lifting up buildings to let them get away. You know, there's a point where there's a dog that won't move, and he blows it out of the way. And so like the whole point of the movie is that Superman cares about lives. And that's what everyone should care about. Everyone should care about lives. We shouldn't be caring about. I understand that there's I'm talking broad strokes here. There is a lot more nuance to this conversation, but and funnily enough, again, that is dealt with in the movie as well. But there's a lot more nuance than that. But in the ideal world, we should care about everyone having their best life. And so many people are caught up in what about me, and what about like the sanctity of their nation, so to speak. When people have moved from country to country for millennia at this point, there's no real place that is pure, quote unquote, of genetics, so to speak, or of cultures or morals, or everyone has there you know, if you look maybe 2 or 3 streets down from where you are, you will find someone who has come from another country. Generally speaking, that's a little bit of a generalization. Again, obviously in more rural areas that won't be the case, but you know, in a place that's a little bit more populous, yeah, that I'd say that's true. And so what I'm trying to say is this movie is about that, and the reason that this movie is about that is because that is what Superman is about. Superman is about saving people. Superman is about the greater good, the better tomorrow. You know, they changed that from American Way to Better Tomorrow for a reason, because Superman is not just a symbol to America, he is a symbol to the world. Funny enough, I guess that I've just realized, which is cool. Wasn't intentional. He is a symbol, very much like Captain America in Marvel, except Captain America and Marvel, of course, still does have the America Association, but he goes against America when he feels it's right. When he knows that something is wrong for the world or for even America itself, he goes against the government. And so Superman does very much the same thing in this movie. He does what he feels is right, but he does it on like a global scale. He does it he represents himself. He says that in the movie. The reason I've said all that is because there's a big subtext in this movie that is the Palestinian Israel crisis, right? The Gaza crisis. Let's not call it a crisis. Let's be honest at what it is. It is a genocide. It is systematically trying to wipe out a whole people so that you can take land. And I don't, you know, I have played around this topic before because I have felt it wasn't the right time to talk about it, or it wasn't the right time for me to get involved, because I didn't know enough. You know, the more we see, though, the more we learn. You know, it's impossible to just say, yeah, that's bad. You have to call it out. You know, you have to say more than that. So this is me saying that, you know, and this movie does that. This movie does that on an unimaginable scale. Andor did that in a very similar way. It is dealing with oppressive forces that are plaguing our world currently, and that plague this fictional metropolis and fictional Baravia and Jahanpur. And you see it. You see this whole civilization that wants new land, and so tries to oust its people, and it does so with the help of foreign powers. In this case, Lex Luthor. In the real world, well, I'll leave that to your imagination, but you know who I'm talking about. And I guess what I think is very important is that media is pushing political messages, because media has always been that. Even before media was media, even before stories were stories, when it was just people talking to each other, when it was just people making stories around a campfire, there was always a political subtext. There was always a moral subtext, a context about the scenarios that these people found themselves in. Some of the oldest tales are morality tales. Look at something like Everyman. It is about morals at the core. The Bible is the first, like, one of the biggest stories. It is a novel in its own way, and it is about being good, being kind, and being caring for the people around you. It is a moral story. A lot of that stuff in there is not real, as people like to take it as. It is a metaphor for how to live. And I'm not the most religious person, but that is how I see it. So, Superman, a movie that fundamentally tackles the issues that are happening in the world currently. And it does through a nuanced lens of saying, well, you can't unilaterally make decisions for everyone. Lois says that to Superman. And he takes that on board, and he understands, and he realizes that actually he can't always be the one to fight these fights. And you see that through the movie. He builds his team, so to speak, his confidants, so to speak, and he inspires. This is a scene in the movie where you see the Jahanpurians putting up a Superman flag, and they are asking for his help. They need his help. They are begging for someone to save them, and he doesn't come. I think that's what's the important part of the movie. Superman does not show up in Jahanpur within this movie, and the reason being is there are other things going on that need his attention. But what does he do? He inspires people to help him do what he needs to do. There are people who go to Jahanpur in his stead, because he has shown the world throughout this movie that there are things bigger than laws. There are things bigger than politics. There are things bigger than the greed of the few, and that is lives and humanity and inspiration and hope. And I'm getting a little bit emotional because that scene really got to me in the movie as well. But as well as that, this movie really plays into comic books. And that's such a big swing, but it's true. This movie is unapologetically doing all of that at the same time as being corny and cheesy and silly and fun. And what is better than giving someone an amazing experience, a feel-good movie that they can leave and feel hopeful from, whilst also giving them something to think about the world that we live in. That is art. Art informs the world. Life informs art. Art informs life. It's one of the biggest rules, the law of storytelling. And so to watch something that does it so masterfully it was a privilege. I would go so far as to say it's a privilege. Now, don't get me wrong. Is this movie overstuffed with characters? Yeah. Do I kind of like that because it's comic booky? Yeah. Do I feel some of those characters could have taken more time? Did I want more time for the Justice Gang? Yes. Did I want them to kind of have a little bit more conflict with Superman in a way? Yeah. I would have liked that. It would have made the ending a little bit more, it would have hit that a little bit harder. Still, I think you have a really good foundational cast for the DCU. Superman, David Corenswet's Superman, amazing. Lois, equally so. I really love their chemistry, and the fact that they weren't just enabling each other, and the fact that they didn't have to go through the whole secret charade again. They knew from the off, and that she wasn't happy with what he was doing at points that she was telling him, and making him see how he needed to be better. Lex, I actually really enjoyed, because the spite that Nicholas Hoult managed to pull out of Lex and put on the screen in all the dialogue he did was unbelievable. To the point you can see Lex. You can see in those moments where he snaps. There's that moment where he is throwing stationery around the room, which I know sounds like very little, but he's telling people to pick it up and stuff. And he then turns on Eve, his then girlfriend, and starts throwing stuff at her. He is an abusive man. He doesn't like that he's not getting his way. He doesn't like that the populace likes Superman over him, and his logic fades when he gets into that mode, and so he loses sight of his objectives, and because of that, he loses. He has too much stake in this. He has too much emotion in this, despite proclaiming to be a great, up there with Galileo and stuff like that. There's a conversation regards that. Even he is envious. It's mentioned in the movie. Speaking of that, actually, I do want to kind of take a side point and say that this movie does exposit a lot, and to a point where I was kind of like, oh, that's a little bit too much at points. Like, I feel like you're just telling me everything I need to know. But I did like when they did the opening kind of crawl, so to speak, and they went like 3,000 years ago, 3 years ago, 3 hours ago, was it 3 minutes ago? No, it wasn't. It was like 3,300. I'm doing this all wrong. 3,033 3 hours. 3 days, 3 hours. No. 3 weeks, 3 days. No, whatever it was. It goes right down to the minutes, basically. It goes like 1,000 years, 30 years, 3 years, 3 weeks, 3 days, 3 hours. It doesn't go to minutes. That's right. That's right. Is that right? I think so. I can't remember now. Anyway, that was good. I do think as well, I saw the side villains of the movie, Engineer and Ultraman. I didn't mind Ultraman so much because you get that kind of reveal later in the movie and you understand why he didn't get fleshed out per se, but it did give kind of Black Noir from The Boys, especially if you know the comic origin of that character. Very much so there. But the Engineer, somewhat interesting, but relatively underdeveloped. I think she could have done with a little bit more time as well, as like the sort of main villain on screen other than Lex. Crypto, I liked Crypto. It was interesting to see what happened with Crypto at the end of the film, where you realize it's not his dog, and there was a throwaway line earlier in the movie that he's just kind of, it's not my dog, I'm just fostering, and you were like, what's that mean? I didn't quite get it. And then you get to the end of the movie, and it's actually that it's Supergirl's dog. Crypto is Supergirl's dog, and she has come back from outer space partying, which I think is an interesting take on Supergirl as well. We've seen very goody two shoes Supergirl with Melissa Benoist, however you say her surname, Supergirl in the CW show, and then you saw kind of a more rage-filled Supergirl in the Flash film that came out the year. So seeing a kind of Supergirl who is being drunk and irresponsible and kind of being more, not a teenager per se, but like a young adult, is quite an interesting take, and I'm interested to see that movie when that comes out. Mr. Terrific, of course, there's rumors he might get his own show. I think well-deserved. Terrific was like definitely the secondary protagonist of the film in such a good way. Guy Gardner, a lot of people warmed to him. I think so too. I actually really liked Nathan Fillion's portrayal of him. You thought he was going to be a really like big antagonist for Superman, and then he wasn't. And it was kind of nice. They were kind of more friendly than that. Anyone else? Pa and Ma Kent. I actually really loved their scenes. It's always interesting to see a character go back to their basics, their roots, and relearn themselves in that way. And we'll go into that in a minute, actually, because Superman, I really think they illustrated the weaknesses of Superman in this film. And also, we have a point to kind of come on to aside from that as well. So we've got a few things still to discuss. But Pa and Ma Kent, very straightforward characters, no messing around this time, no complexities to them, and not in a bad way. I think these characters should be simple. They are simple farmers. They are not meant to be these completely complex characters that have big moral statements to make. They are good people. They want Clark to be a good person. They are proud of what he's doing, and that was enough. There was a scene with Pa and Clark and Superman sitting on the bench looking out at the farm, and all the conversation is about is saying, you have to make your own mistakes, and all I need to do is let you make them. And that is so resonant with, I think, so many people in terms of what they're trying to do in the world. Are they doing the right thing? Do they need to follow in their parents' footsteps? Are they their parents? You know, that's such a big thing for so many people. And the reason for that, of course, in the movie is that Jor-El, we find out that Jor-El and his wife, I forget the name of Superman's biological mother, but they wanted him to come to Earth and repopulate Kryptonians, basically, by way of having multiple wives and basically populating the Earth with super people. And some people are very up in arms about this change. Jor-El and Krypton are usually pretty good people, and they're a good civilization who has been ruined by the few, you know, Zod and those kinds of people. Am I interested in a take where they suggest that Superman is from a bad background? Yes, and the reason why, and I think this movie does a very good job of it, is Superman has always been seen as the infallible hero. And people want this. This is what's so annoying. People want Superman not to be able to fail, because there's part of it that is sort of about that hope factor, that they want someone who is invincible because they feel like they can project onto that, right? But there's some people who want, like, it's the Wonder versus Thor debate from Marvel. People want characters that don't fail because they think, oh, well, that guy should be really powerful and, like, he's not allowed to fail, and if he fails, it's just... No, that's bad writing. Every story ever made has a conflict, and a conflict can't just be the hero winning, because if the hero just wins all the time, then there's no conflict in actuality, and more than that, there's no stakes. I think people have forgotten what writing and story is, and it's somewhat upsetting. But the reason I'm bringing that up is, in this movie, Superman is faced with the court of public opinion. He is faced with kryptonite, which obviously is his biggest actual flaw, like physical flaw, apart from magic, which obviously isn't used in this movie necessarily. And you see him at the beginning of the movie. I think this was brilliant. The first time you see Corenswit's Superman on screen, he has been defeated. He is lost. He is basically dying out in the snow, and of course he survives and gets through that. But seeing this Superman who is in a fragile state from the off paints a picture of this universe, and that is that this universe is not beholden to Superman. It is not thankful for Superman existing to deal with its threats. And again, they do this later in the movie. They set up a moment where Superman is watching the Justice Gang, well, not watching, but letting the Justice Gang deal with an interdimensional imp, because he knows that he doesn't need to be there all the time. There are other heroes on this earth. There are other things going on that he can't control all the time. And it reminds me of something that happened in the Flash movie. And I didn't, don't get me wrong, that movie is bad for a number of reasons. I didn't hate it, but it's not great. And obviously everything that happened with Ezra Miller, it's a whole mess. But one thing I think that movie did well was explaining where the other characters were, so that you know that not everyone can be in a fight at any given time. You know, this is a big thing in comics. Why doesn't every hero turn up to a fight? Well, because they're either doing their other thing, or actually, did you need to have 10 people show up at a fight that can be handled by 2 people, right? It's actually quite, it's funny when you think about it. Why would you do that? You know, let's say that in Spider-Man, for example, why would Iron Man, the Fantastic Four, She-Hulk, Daredevil all show up for Spider-Man dealing with Shocker, for example? Spider-Man can deal with Shocker. We know that. It's his rogues gallery. He can do it. You know, obviously, yes, these characters call in help now and again, and sometimes depending on like power scaling, which I hate that term, you might need another character or two, and they will call in favors when they need to. But the idea that you can just kind of leave, you know, Gotham is Batman's arena. You know, Batman can deal with that. Metropolis is Superman's arena. You can relatively deal with that. Of course, in this instance, that's the opposite. He knows that the Justice Gang, Mr. Terrific, Guy, guys, Green Lantern and Hawkgirl, can deal with this. So he leaves them to it. And I think that's such a good precedence for the DCU going forward, to know that actually these heroes are not always going to be involved in everything. But in that same way, it's so comic booky, right? You're seeing a fight go off in the distance that isn't really part of the story. But you know that could, like let's say they do a Mr. Terrific project. Could you see that flip side of that bottle for some reason? Does that lead into something? Probably not, but like there's the potentiality there. That could be like, that would be like what a crossover comic book would be. You'd see something, oh, this happened in issue, and then you could go to that issue. So like, let's say that Superman was a comic book, and so was Justice Gang, which I hate that name, by the way. They mentioned that in the movie, but that would be like their issue for like this crossover event, quote unquote. So that would be really cool. I like the concept of that. Not that that's what's going to happen, but I like the concept, the idea that is almost comic booky in and of itself. What else do I want to say about this movie? I think fundamentally, what is good about this movie is that it doesn't take itself too seriously, at the same time as taking the issues that it deals with very seriously. And I think that is probably one of the best mixes you can ask for. I also want to applaud James Gunn, and I think this is very important, on not falling prey to too many of his Gunnisms, as I call them, in this. Yes, there were a few tracks played. They fit. They didn't feel it didn't feel like every 2 seconds I was listening to some kind of pop culture reference. I also feel like he didn't quite go for the kind of ragtag group in this one. The Justice Gang are there, but they're actually relatively stuck together. They didn't turn into this ragtag family kind of Suicide Squad group. So that was good. I do still get hung up every time that there's a character in one of these movies that is just one of his typical casting choices. Because Nathan Fillion, of course, is someone he's used many times. So is Bradley Cooper now. So is his wife. Not in this movie necessarily, but yeah. Oh, also there was a Peacemaker little cameo, which I thought was quite fun. That just came into my mind there. But I do feel like, and I know this will happen as the DCU inevitably expands, but I do kind of want him to, his brother as well, Sean Gunn, of course, as Maxwell Lord. I do kind of hate that. I want, a wider variety of people in these movies. And I do think he's doing it. I understand that, if you're a director and you have a role and you have people who are very willing to do it for someone who's pretty close to you, then you're going to do that to a degree. I get it. But I think I'm excited to see stuff going forward. Like, again, you're going to have Jason Momoa come back as Lobo in this next in the Supergirl movie, and like, I get it, because he was very excited about this character, but it does feel somewhat like, let's reuse the same people all over again in new surrounds. Yeah, I don't love it, but that's very much my one nitpick of James Gunn. I think generally he's very good at what he does. He understands these characters. He is unapologetic about what he's doing with these characters, and he does it in a way that revitalizes them. The thing that actually is probably my favorite part of this movie is how colorful it is, how wondrous it is in what it does. It is not grim dark. It goes to one dark place throughout the movie, and it's to establish Lex as he means business. And that was quite a good scene, actually, despite it hurt a little bit, but it was a good scene. Yeah, so I think this is a good start for DCU. And I think compared to Creature Commandos, which I still haven't finished, and other Gunn projects that I've seen before, it was a big change in terms of how he's approached this. And I think for the better. I did like it. I am excited for more, both a Superman sequel and Supergirl and other movies that will be coming, and shows as well. So we'll be looking out for more Superman, super things, DCU things imminently, I imagine. We'll probably get a few things announced soon now that this has succeeded. We'll probably see a flurry of new information regards other projects. But yeah, I think this is one to keep it well, not keep an eye on, to go and watch. Go and watch it. I enjoyed it. A lot of people enjoyed it that I know. So let's get out and watch it. Let's show everyone that this is a good movie and worth watching, and let's keep discussing those issues that it's tackling. I think on this one, a little bit more poignant of an end note for this episode, but I think it's worth saying. So thank you guys for watching and listening as always, and I will see you guys next week for more. Bye guys.